Good morning, gentlemen, and welcome to this interesting webinar organized by Telecom Review Africa. We are going to speak today with the best expert in our industry in ICT about the 5G deployment in North Africa. Why this technology, this very important technology, has been delayed. What are their point of view on that, either in terms of operator, in terms of vendor, or either in terms of people specialized in this industry. Let me today introduce to you our esteemed speakers on this panel. I will start with one of our panelists, and he is also going to have the opening note for today's 5G deployment in North Africa. Mr. Kenichi Okelele, Director at the GSMA Intelligence. Welcome, Kenichi. We are going to have Zoran Lazarevich, the CTO for Market Area for Middle East and Africa at Ericsson. Welcome, Zoran. Mustafa Hijazi, the Director of IT and Network Innovation and Strategy at Orange Egypt. And we have as well Mr. Youssef Mrabit, as well, the CTO for North and West Africa at Nokia. Gentlemen, I can give you 1 minute just to introduce yourself and to tell me quickly about you. I can start with Mr. Kenichi.
Thank you so much, Isam. Hello, everyone. Kenichi Okeleke here, Director at GSMA Intelligence. For those of you who may not be aware, GSMA Intelligence is the research arm of the GSMA, and in my role, I lead much of our reports focused on the various regions, including Middle East and North Africa. And the topic we'll be discussing today, 5G deployment in North Africa, is one I've done several research reports on. So it's a pleasure to join you today.
Thank you, Kenichi. Zoran.
Yes, good morning or good afternoon. Let me first begin by extending my deepest condolences to the people of Morocco who have lost their loved ones in this tragic earthquake. Our thoughts are with the Moroccan people during these difficult times. So I'm CTO for Middle East and Africa. This is a very big and diverse region. On one area, we have some of the most advanced, globally most advanced mobile networks, 5G networks, like in GCC countries. And then on the other side, we have a region like Sub-Sahara Africa with lowest ARPU, heading for average revenue per user, which is limiting, of course, possibilities to develop the latest technology. In our focus today will be North Africa. I'm assuming North Africa is between those two extremes, looking forward and planning to make this leap toward the most advanced networks. And I'm really looking for this discussion, which we're going to have why we should deploy 5G, and something which is even closer to my expertise, how we should deploy. What is the most efficient way to achieve these high-performing networks, which we are seeing, for instance, in GCC countries.
Thank you, Zoran. I would give the word to Mr. Mustafa Hijazi.
Good morning, everyone, and good afternoon as well. I joined Zoran. Our condolences for the American people, our brothers there for this crisis. I work for Orange Egypt. Orange Egypt actually was one of the first mobile operators started operations in Egypt back in 1998. I had the chance actually to join at that time, so I lived all the journey since the start till today. I'm currently heading the IT and network innovation and strategy. We are looking for the 5G deployment here in Egypt because we see the opportunity and we are looking to have this quickly as much as we can. Thank you.
Thank you, Mustafa. Youssef, please.
Thank you. Good morning. I would like to thank my peers for the condolences and also extend them to my compatriots and also to the people of Libya who are also, experiencing floods and disasters there. I'm really looking forward to this discussion because, as you know, technology is also a way to improve people's lives and sometimes to save those lives. So as 5G is a very crucial technology, and being based in the very nice region, which is North Africa, we are really looking forward to participate and make it a reality. So my name, as you said, is Youssef Mrabet. I'm based in Morocco and working for Nokia, a leading provider of technology and telecom equipment. Our mission is, of course, to help the world act together, as we like to say it. And this is pretty much in line with our team today. Thanks.
Thank you, Youssef. I would give the opening note for our esteemed guest, Mr. Kelechi Okeleke, Director at the GSMA Intelligence.
Okay, thank you very much. Issam, if you can share the slides. In full screen mode. All right, thank you. So I'm not we've done the introductions, so I will not spend much time on the opening 2 slides, but just to remind our audience that today we'll be talking about 5G deployment in North Africa. So if we move to the next slide. The GSMA Intelligence, I introduced a while ago, the research of the GSMA. You can check us online, to see the volume of data and reports, that we have, including on this particular topic, 5G. So if we move on to the next slide, and we'll start our full discussion there. So I thought the best place to start from is to give a global view of where we are in terms of 5G commercialization. I'm going to talk about 5G spectrum shortly, but in terms of 5G commercialization, this is obviously something we track at GSMA Intelligence, and as of June 2023, 238 operators in 94 markets globally, have already launched 5G. Now 106 of these operators, in 52 markets have also launched fixed wireless, access. We also have other numbers there, 254 operators in 110 markets are currently conducting, or have conducted trials, of 5G, about 757 of those trials. And, companies like Nokia and Ericsson, who are also on the call, have been at the forefront, supporting operators through these trials. If we move on to the next slide, please. So, so I thought also, I should give a global overview of spectrum. I think this is important because as we go into the discussions later on, we'll see what role spectrum, plays in terms of where we are for 5G deployment in North Africa. So looking at the global view, so spectrum bands, for 5G have been assigned to date to the end of June 2023 in 79 countries globally. While 270 individual operators, across these different countries have already received 5G spectrum. I think we're on the wrong screen. Thank you. So 217 individual operators have already received 5G spectrum. If you stay on this slide, what I wanted to call out here is the importance of the different, bands of spectrum for 5G, the low band, the mid band, and the high band. Of course, we all know, that the mid band, has pretty much been the driving force for 5G deployment globally, with about 239 operators, having launched 5G in the mid band. But it's interesting to note the progress that's been made in both the low band, and the high band. And I think this is something that is important for regulators to consider, going forward, especially in Africa, as they think about making spectrum available for 5G services. We'll move on to the next slide. So this is bringing it home now to where we are in Africa. So I've kind of like taken the different regions in Africa, North Africa, West Africa, East Africa, Central Africa, and Southern Africa to give us an idea, of where we are in terms of 5G commercialization, trials, and of course spectrum. And you'll see the numbers jump out at you there. For West Africa, 5 commercial 5G networks, East Africa, 6 operators launch 5G, Central 2 operators, and Southern Africa, 16 operators. But if you look at North Africa, no commercial 5G network yet. In terms of trials, operators across the region, have all been conducting 5G trials. And then when you come to spectrum assignments, specifically, for 5G, you will see that in West, East, Central, and Southern Africa, 5G spectrum have been assigned, to operators. But again, if you look at North Africa, that is something that is still being awaited. We'll move on to the next slide. So the question that may be on people's minds, when you see how 5G is progressing in other regions and even in sub-Saharan Africa, the question that may be on people's minds is, is North Africa ready for 5G? The fact that commercial 5G services haven't been launched in North Africa, does that indicate, that the sub-region is not ready for 5G? Well, try to look into this, more closely. There are different metrics you can use to measure the readiness of a market for 5G. But for the purpose of this presentation, I have used 2 of them, for consumer readiness, and that's, smartphone and 4G adoption levels. And if you look, on the map, North Africa is highlighted. You will see that both in terms of smartphone adoption and also 4G adoption, the region, the sub-region very much outperforms the other sub-regions in sub-Saharan Africa, including in many of those markets, where 5G have already been launched. And if you compare North Africa with the global average, you will see the smartphone adoption in North Africa is even higher than the global average. And in terms of 4G adoption, it's just 10 percentage points behind, the global average. So from this perspective, you could come to the conclusion that as far as the consumer is concerned in North Africa, they're indeed ready, for 5G. But 5G is not only a consumer story, it's not only a demand story. You also have a supply story. And when you think about the supply side of things across the region, and we have Orange with us today, who will be delving into this in more details, I believe. But operators across North Africa have been investing significantly in modernizing, their networks and making them 5G ready. So from that perspective, you could also say that from the supply side, North Africa is very much on the right track for 5G. So what is the issue? I think, the issue there is spectrum. We saw that in one of the previous slides. There's a question mark on it as we go into the discussions. I'm sure that we're going to discuss, the issue around spectrum in a lot more details. Now, this is my final slide, and what I wanted to, point out here is our outlook for 5G in North Africa. And this is based on the assumption, that between now and 2024, we're going to begin to see commercial 5G services in North Africa. And so we have built out this forecast based on that assumption. And what we're seeing is that by 2030, there'll be more than 130 million 5G connections in North Africa, which is equivalent to 41% of total mobile connections by that time. Just to put it in context, global 5G adoption will be 54%, so not too far ahead of the North Africa region. And in Sub-Saharan Africa, it will be 17%. So North Africa would have caught up and overtaken Sub-Saharan Africa by a significant margin. But why is this the case? It speaks to the point I made earlier around 5G readiness. North Africa has a high level of 5G readiness, and it's a question, of overcoming the obstacles still in the way, for commercial networks to go live, and we'll begin to see that growth. Finally, we've also tried to build out an estimate of the economic impact 5G could have in North Africa. We think that between now and 2030, between when 5G is launched and 2030, cumulatively, 5G will benefit the North African economy by as much as $6.6 billion. So that is a quick overview, of the 5G story in North Africa. But I'm sure as we go into the conversations and the discussions, we'll get the opportunity to pick, or unpick some of these points that I have made here. It's a quick presentation, but feel free to reach out, at any time via email, if you want to go into some of those numbers in more detail. Thank you so much, Sam.
Thank you, Kenichi. I really like the presentation. It's very, very interesting. The numbers are really promising, and the North African countries are honestly, as you said in your presentation, they are really ready for the 5G adoption. So let us start our question and webinars, as we need as well to hear the insights from the operator and vendor side. So let me start by the first question. Gentlemen, what is the current state of 5G deployment in Northern African countries? And can you update us on the progress of commercial testing in these countries themselves? I will give the word to Mustafa Hijazi from Orange, Egypt, so we can hear your point of view from an operator's point of view.
Hey, welcome everyone. Really, I thank Mr. Kenichi. It's a very nice presentation with really summarizing the situation, not only in North Africa, but also in all Africa. So as Mr. Kenichi said, almost most of the operators in North Africa have already started the testing and field trials. We got here in Egypt license or clearance from regulatory to test 5G in the field. And they followed actually the tests, and some use cases were already tested. It was successful. So actually I think we are ready from a network point of view. Sure, we are lacking the spectrum. We have invested in the last couple of years, and most of the operators here in Egypt already in acquiring an extension of the spectrum for the 4G services in the 2.6 gigahertz band. We consider also this spectrum could serve also in the early 5G launch. So actually the current discussion with the regulatory about availing probably more spectrum, hopefully to be in the 3.5 gigahertz, and also the license terms and all these things. There was some discussions between the operators and the regulatory about the license terms, how it should be built and how it should be really agreed for the coming years, the introduction, the footprint, the coverage obligations, the quality of service obligations, and most of all as well the expected, I would say, cost of acquisition, because here actually we paid a lot in the TDD spectrum, only the last couple of years for all the operators. So actually there are also some concerns about the cost of the acquisition. We think it should be in the normal range, given that the use cases that we are expecting the early beginning of the 5G, maybe as Mr. Kenichi said, is going to follow the fixed wireless access as a start. The migration of traffic between 4G and 5G at the early start is not expected to be huge. As we see that the 5G capable handsets out of the existing smartphones, the penetration does not exceed 10%. So actually, the cost of the deployment, the early deployment, we think that we should have not big costs from the acquisition point of view, of the license point of view, in order to have a quick and speedy launch to cover a large area. Thank you.
Thank you, Mustafa. I want to hear Yusuf's opinion on that, please.
Yeah, thank you. So as Kenichi said, even if 5G is not commercially launched in any of the North African countries, and even if frequencies as well are not yet allocated, the encouraging side is that many countries are now starting to announce their roadmap. Tunisia will announce it very soon, for instance. And also most of the operators are not waiting basically for that. They have already carried out different levels of demos, tests, and trials starting from 2019 to better appreciate the technology, its capabilities, and to experiment with some use cases and reflect about the monetization of 5G, which is very important. Some have publicly, of course, communicated on these tests, like in Algeria, Tunisia, and Egypt. Some haven't. But most importantly for us, what we observe as vendors is that many, if not, of course, all the CSPs are incrementally invested to prepare their network. This comprises uplifts for their backbone transport capabilities, which are crucial with the higher capacity of 5G, upgrades to the core network to support the new features of 5G, as well as modernization of their radio access network, because of course there is more and more demand on those networks. So actually networks live and evolve constantly between the generation, and this is really to cope with the capacity and with performance demand that keeps growing. And basically this is what makes the operator, I would say, almost ready for the 5G. Of course, as we discussed before, the frequency allocation by the regulator is a major milestone. There will be a last deployment effort when the operators will have will have the frequencies allocated, because they need to add those new radio layers, typically the mid-band layers that will carry on the new radio for 5G. But there are technologies today that allow them to anticipate. There are products that allow them to to cover the full band. So as soon as they have clarity from the regulator about what bands will be used for 5G, they can, in agreement with the regulator, start deploying and not waiting for the final allocation of the bandwidth. So those are the encouraging signs that we see for North Africa.
If I can also add.
Yes, of course, Zoran. Please. Thank
Yes,
you, Yusuf.
no,
Zoran.
Thanks so much. No, I like very much how we are setting the tone, and fully agree with Mr. Kenichi's point here on the spectrum. That's also our view, that this is this is where it should be our focus when it comes to North Africa. And I'm assuming we're gonna go in deeper into discussion, but I think regulators play obviously a big role here, and it's not only what spectrum is allocated, also how it is really allocated, what technology is dictating how we need to allocate the spectrum. And I think we have some great examples here in neighboring countries. I was mentioning GCCs and which did a great job really enabling that operators here is excelling as some of the best performing networks globally. So I think there's going to be a lot to focus really, because with a proper way of allocating the frequency, we can achieve win-win here. We can achieve that we are of course, serving most of the customers with highest performing network, but also building the network on the most cost-effective way, which is also interest for the regulators. I think I'm looking forward for that part of discussion and fully aligned that spectrum should be in the highest focus for North Africa 5G deployment.
Thank you, Zoran. Yes, of course, we will get back to the question of the spectrum. Kelechi, would you like to add anything on the first question, or we can move to the second question?
Yeah, I think we can move to the second question. My colleagues on the call have done justice to this first one.
Okay, perfect. Gentlemen, considering the substantial impact anticipated from the 5G technology, what are the projected effects on the GDP growth of all the North African nations or countries? Are there any estimation figures or any available for individual counties that can provide some insights? I don't know if we can start with Mustafa, Yusuf, Zoran, Kelechi. Who can take the answer?
Yeah, I think I can take. So, in recent years, there has been a lot of research on, impact of 5G, and we have now some insights from the countries that already launched. So PwC estimates that the global GDP impact of 5G, and this is really across industries and vertical, that it will reach $1.3 trillion by 2030. That's an uplift of about 1% of the GDP coming specifically from 5G. Of course, the scale of a national economy, it will influence directly the GDP uplift that 5G can contribute, meaning that if you have stronger, more modern economies with industrial sectors that are strong, of course, the economy will benefit more from 5G. But we are in North Africa, and I believe for North Africa, the opportunity is particularly important. For instance, if we take 5G fixed wireless access, which is supposed to be one of the killer use cases for 5G, it can play a huge role to bridge the digital divide in the region, knowing that household penetration of fixed broadband is still between 25 and 50%. So, and this is also valid for small and medium businesses in this region that are eager to get, a very high speed fixed broadband. 5G fixed wireless access would allow to reach households in rural, in suburban areas more quickly, and that's a cheaper cost, of course. Hence, effectively, it will complement the FTTH as we see it, and will help accelerate the national strategies, to make fixed broadband ubiquitous. And this is in the national plans of many countries like Morocco, Tunisia, and Egypt, Algeria as well. So it is a very important point. And also, that coming to these national initiatives, we know that most countries also target digitalization as a means to boost socioeconomic change, to boost competitiveness, and to position maybe as a regional hub for industry or logistics. In many sectors, digitalization is a huge priority, even for enterprises to increase productivity. So in many vertical sectors like mining, manufacturing, for instance, we already see that 5G is deployed, to increase is deployed as private networks to increase this productivity. So these sectors are already having 5G in their roadmap to basically even increase more the productivity, add new use cases, and enable new capabilities. So for us, of course, the idea is that 5G is really crucial for the region.
Thank you, Yusuf. Kelechi, would you like to comment?
Yes, no, absolutely. I'm just going to build on this point. As I mentioned in my projection or in my presentation, my colleagues in the econometrics team within the GSMAI, tried to work out a projection of the economic impact, of 5G, in the North Africa region. We'll have this for global different regions for the whole of Africa. By 2030, it's going to be about $26 billion but for North Africa in particular, it's going to be about $6.6 billion. So what's going to drive this economic impact? I think, Yusuf has touched on many of those points, improvement in productivity, increase in productivity, which 5G can bring to businesses, both large and small, and greater efficiency in the way governments, deliver services to citizens. All of these will add to economic impact and growth. In terms of sectors that will see the greatest impact, according to our research, we think retail, manufacturing, and the services sector, are going to see significant impact, from 5G. And maybe this is a good point, a good time to mention, this point. It's something that I always refer to whenever I talk about 5G in Africa as a whole. If we think back to the early days of 5G globally, 2019, 2020, it seemed like, oh, we're not, going to see 5G, in Africa anytime soon. The region is going to lag behind, and so on and so forth. But there was a point that I always made, and that is the fact, that Africa has the opportunity to, learn from the experiences of the pioneers. Okay, new solutions are coming up, new services are coming up, and there is an opportunity that when a sub-region like North Africa eventually begins its 5G journey, rather than reinventing, the wheel, there's going to be a whole lot of lessons to draw from pioneer markets, which can very quickly accelerate growth. So we're seeing 5G being applied across different sectors in different, developed markets. It's just going to be a case of, localizing many of those solutions, and you're going to see a faster impact of 5G on the economy, in these countries coming up now than in countries, that had gone previously, because they had to initially spend time to learn what works or what doesn't work. Okay, but for a region like North Africa, the moment 5G comes, it's just going to be a case of pick what works and immediately commercialize that, and we'll see the results very quickly.
Thank you, Kelechi. Mustafa, can we have your opinion?
Question. Yeah, actually, I'm confirming. I mean, it's what Yusuf and Mr. Kelechi said, that we see some opportunities, especially in the private networks side for the business. For example, here in Egypt, there's a big focus on the harbors and trading, logistics. Actually, 5G could really provide a very big opportunity in managing all these kind of trading logistics activities in the harbors, facilitating all the transactions, save time and save money, and hence really it will add to the economy. Also, the fixed wireless access opportunity, especially when the country is not really having a wide fiber optic network, then the 5G fixed wireless access could be, I would say, the quick and the right solutions to provide the high speed and allowing different applications really to work across the broadband across the whole country in a quicker time. So actually, I'm confirming on both those applications as our target use cases for the 5G deployment to add to the country economy and the global GDP as well.
Thank you, Mustafa. Zoran?
No, I mean, I want to echo on what was discussed about fixed wireless access for our audience, standing for, fixed FWA. So using mobile network to provide home broadband. Obviously, there's a need, as we know, in North Africa for home broadband, and using mobile network to provide home broadband could be, and it's proven to be much more efficient than digging the channels and laying down the fibers. So globally, this is proven that as one of the most successful use cases. Also here in the region, we have some fantastic examples from Oman and Omantel that intensively using with great success a 5G network because of its capacity, because of its quality, something which was not possible so efficiently with the previous technology. So this is, I think, a no-brainer really for the North Africa. Maybe just to add on that note, I think we can expect this year, next year, that it's going to be even bigger boom when it comes to fixed wireless access, because what Jio in India is doing, they're planning to use 5G standalone network, so this is the most advanced 5G network, to provide home broadband in millimeter wave. And you have that kind of massive market and scale, they're going to lower down the cost of this commonly known routers, or how we call it CPEs, customer premise equipment, which you need to put at home to provide connectivity. So this massive market definitely gonna bring the price down, and that could be fantastic use case for operators in North Africa. Obviously, in millimeter wave, we have even bigger capacity than we have in the mid-band. So I think this is the first definitely step. But what Ericsson, we are saying that with 5G use cases, we should take these measurable steps. We should start with some use cases which are closer to what we're already doing. And fixed wire access is definitely one of these. And then move to other use cases, which is a little bit out of our comfort zone. Mustafa was mentioning private networks, and definitely that would be the next step. It's a different business case. It's different how build the network. That's something which operators also need to be custom and to use it and to use to it. But this is the area where we need to move. And then, of course, I mean, it also depends on ecosystem. Fixed wireless, 5G with its speed and latency are fantastic for consumers also, for gaming. We have this recently launched on iPhone, or this Pro Visual device, so augmented reality, virtual reality devices are coming to the market. That ecosystem is developing. That is all will be relying on 5G. So advice and our experience, what we are seeing really is to start something which is close to the business, what we are doing. Fixed wire access is fantastic starting point, and then move closely, step by step into more complex and new use cases which 5G can support.
Thank you, Zoran. I'm going to move to the third question, gentlemen. Sustainability is high on agendas of both governments and service providers. In North Africa region, apart from sustainability goals, there is also practical challenges with energy supply. How the deployment of 5G will impact energy consumption on those service providers. Zoran, can you give us your opinion on that? I'm going to start with you.
Oh, great. Thank you for asking this question, because this is very important. Of course, energy consumption sustainability, but it's also important in the aspects of 5G. So 5G is the most efficient technology we invented that we are deploying. With 5G, Ericsson saying, we are saying that we can break energy curve. What does it mean, breaking the energy curve? I mean, with every technology, starting with 1G, 2G, 3G, 4G, we always improve the network. We always improve the speed. We always improve the capacity, improve the latency. It's always much better than previous technology. But it's also what's happening. We also increase the energy consumption. So we have this curve that we improve quality, but we increase also energy consumption. And that's simply not sustainable. I mean, how long we're gonna increase. So with 5G, we believe and we demonstrate that it's possible to break this energy curve, so that we can, of course, increase quality, increase the capacity, increase the speed, but we can reduce energy consumption. And it's greatly embedded in how 5G technology is invented, how it is standardized, but also how it is built, how we are building equipment to enable. This is the first aspect, and that's what you said, of course. Saving energy is important from the cost point of view, from sustainability point of view. But when we come to sustainability, I mean, ICT as industry is contributing. I think we have a report from Ericsson Research. around 1.4% of CO2 emission, obviously through this energy consumption. But you know what is interesting? Interesting that ICT industry can reduce up to 15% of CO2 emission from other industries. And key here is digitalization, and key here is 5G, which is enabling this digitalization. So through digitalization of industry, to building this industry, as it was said, much more efficiently, doing much more efficiently, much more productive processes, we can reduce energy consumption. So in that aspect also, 5G is very important.
Thank you, Zoran. Yusuf, would you like to comment on this question, please?
Yes, I can definitely echo that. And at Nokia, what we say is that there is no green without digital, simply because, of course, digitalization is a major part of this journey to improve energy consumption. It comes in different ways, as Zoran highlighted. 5G is the most efficient technology when it comes to the cost per gigabyte, but also to the cost per gigabyte per watt consumed. But maybe it's also part of the overall spectrum reflection that Zoran highlighted in the beginning. The fact that, of course, there need to be a spectrum evolution strategy at the operators on how they want to move forward with the technologies, how they want to phase out the older technologies like 2G, 3G, and that would help them, of course, move to 5G, which is more efficient, provide more bandwidth to that 5G, which will bring even more, gains in the network. So this is really an important topic that we are trying, to push with our customers and with the regulators, because we believe it will not only make the business case much more appealing for the operators, but help them be even more efficient for the planet.
Yeah,
I can
jump in. I can jump
Yes,
in
please,
very
Kenneth.
briefly with another perspective, and yeah, Zoran and Yusuf have obviously, spoken a lot about the technical solutions to make networks more energy efficient. But I just wanted to add to that the trend that we're seeing towards the use of alternative sources, renewable energy sources, particularly things like solar, and across Middle East and Africa, Orange clearly, stands out, as one operator, that has done a great deal, in utilizing solar in its networks in Jordan, and in several countries also in Africa. And, beyond Africa, we have also seen different models of trying to bring in the use of alternative energy sources to reduce the cost of energy. We all obviously know the impact of the crisis in Ukraine on energy costs in the last few years, and what impact that's had on operators networks. So it's something that we're going to see more of going forward, operators exploring other alternative sources of energy to further reduce the amounts that they spend on energy. And talking about 5G and its densification requirements, we know that it's almost inevitable to find cheaper sources of energy to be able to deploy 5G efficiently.
Thank you, Kenichi. Mustafa, would you like to add anything, or we can move to the fourth question?
A very quick comment that actually I would say the major concern now from the operator side is during the introduction, because you're adding a new technology, and as Yusuf said, you are having multiple generations. So really at the early beginning, we will witness an increase in energy consumption. It's inevitable because we are carrying 4G plus 5G and probably 3G and 2G at the same time until really we decide on the sunset of any of these generations. So it will happen at the long term. Yes, that the 5G will be more efficient in terms of the current traffic per energy unit. However, at the early beginning and at the start, the curve of the energy consumption will rise, and it's inevitable. A fact that we'll have to really work on how to mitigate it, and maybe searching for the renewables and sources really to achieve the green KPIs.
With all respect, if you allow me, I need to disagree here. We have examples.
Okay.
We have examples, practical examples where we deployed 5G and still, so adding new spectrum, completely new spectrum, new radio, and still reducing overall consumption, maintaining 2G, 3G, or whatever previous technology is the example. Of course, that depends how modernized is the network, how new or old, because of course, not only 5G, also 2G, 3G is much more efficient with new technology, with old technologies. But we have, and we are not changing, operators are not changing every year, 2 years, always it's possibility to modernize and to improve performance of the network. So we have practical examples of operators that we are managing from day one to introduce new spectrum, introduce 5G, and still reduce energy consumption.
Great, this is great. Thanks to Erickson.
Thank you, Zoran. Now that you've opened the spectrum question, I'm going to move to a question to another, so we can hear the opinions from a vendor's perspective and from operators' perspective. How much of the new spectrum should operators secure for the 5G deployment? Zoran, if you would like to start, or Mustafa.
Yes, please. Yes. No, as you said, I mean, this is, I think, all of us agreed here. That was the key moment, the key component which is really required to move forward with 5G deployment in North Africa. It's fantastic to see from Mr. Kenechi's presentation that we have very good, actually, availability of smartphones and 4G phones or advanced phones in North Africa region. So spectrum is the key component. We can deploy 5G even in existing spectrum. So this is possible. And it is done in a number of the countries. I know that is discussed also in Egypt to reuse existing spectrum to deploy. And it will be a little bit more efficient. I mean, it is more efficient technology, but it's limited improvement. So in the areas, in the countries where spectrum, that new spectrum was not allocated and 5G is deployed in existing spectrum, meaning that you repurpose spectrum. So you use spectrum which was used for some other technologies, now repurposed for 5G. As I said, you get a little bit more efficiency because it is more efficient technology. But at the end, you don't have this really wow effect with end users. End users don't see that massive benefits with 5G deployment. I mean, we are bound with law of the physics here. If you have small small spectrum in which you are deploying, that's also limiting your capacity and your speed. Sometimes even they build a bad perception in some of the countries by deploying in an existing spectrum, not having this massive improvement which potential which 5G can bring, is building that bad perception that there's no big improvement or no big differences between 5G and 4G. So allocating that new spectrum is really the key. And typical here, and I think it was mentioned by Mustafa, is typically is that mid-band, what we call mid-band TVD spectrum, that in 2.6 on or 3.5 gigahertz. And if you allow me, I will add one more point. So first is to allocate new spectrum is important to secure, but also how we secure that new spectrum is very important. 5G technology is, in 5G technology, we have these carriers, what we call, which is 100 megahertz wide. So it is most efficient that operators are getting spectrum in the block of 100 megahertz. And this is the role really of regulators. This is something, if you look how it was allocation done in Saudi, in UAE, in Qatar, in those GCC countries which are more advanced, a regulator was putting a lot of effort to ensure that each and every operator will get at least one carrier 100 megahertz band or 2 or 3. And why this is important? This is important because we as a vendor, we are building equipment following this 100 megahertz carrier. It's obviously not cheap equipment. And if operator is buying this equipment, they want to use it 100%. They don't want to buy this equipment, this radio, advanced radio, then use only 5 or 10% of its capability because they have only 20 megahertz or 10 megahertz of spectrum to use it. This is not efficient investment. That not efficient investment is just reflecting all the way. They're going to have less number of sites deployed. By less number of sites, there will be less performance, end user will be less satisfied. And of course, then government is also not achieving the target. Government will have the interest to have the best possible network for maximum number of the people reaching maximum of the country to achieve these digitalization goals. So I think those two aspects is very important. First, of course, we need to have the new spectrum. Otherwise, it will be reusing of existing spectrum. No much improvement will be there. Actually, even degradation can be. I should mention also that one because we have a lot of, let's say, 4G user, 2G users, and then you are using spectrum for 2G users that those 2 users now they cannot use. They will be unhappy because by reducing the spectrum for legacy technology, meaning performance for legacy technology, and we know we have a lot of legacy technology devices in Africa, in North Africa. So we need new spectrum, but also how we allocate that is very important. So that we allocate following technology, we allocate in these blocks over 100 megahertz to maximize usability of that investment. So this will be win-win approach, I think, for all the stakeholders, for end users, for consumers, for customers, for operators, and for the regulators as somebody who is driving digitalization.
Thank you, Zoran. Seems exciting times for you at Ericsson. Yusuf, can you give us your? Please.
Yeah, I can probably agree with Zoran on this because, of course, spectrum is the real estate in telecom. So it's very crucial to have a proper allocation of enough bandwidth for the operators. Of course, 100 meg is, becoming the de facto standard, I would say, because it gives enough capacity for the operator to properly use the equipment that they get to get a good return over investment from their equipment. And we shouldn't forget what is the focus. We talked about fixed wireless access as being crucial, for instance, for the region. And fixed wireless access is a very capacity intensive use case because you have subscribers that have basically the usage criteria of fixed subscribers, not of mobile subscribers. So you need to provide them enough capacity. Of course, spectrum is a part of that. There are other new innovative technologies in 5G like massive MIMO that enable to increase that capacity to use it even better. But nonetheless, spectrum is very crucial and we cannot say it enough. And this brings me back again to the topic I touched on earlier, which is previous technologies. It is really also crucial for the regulators to think about, technology neutrality for the previous spectrum that was already allocated. That would allow the operators to find what is the best way forward for their network and when to start, moving that spectrum from legacy technologies like 2G, 3G, or even 4G towards 5G, because 5G again is more efficient. It will provide, it will be the enabler basically of all what we discussed. So, technology neutrality on the spectrum is also one very important topic on top of, the amount of spectrum that we are allocating.
Thank you, Yusuf. Mustafa, do you agree with Zoran's and Yusuf?
Yeah, and normally, yes. If we are running 5G on the existing spectrum only, that means we are degrading the experience of our 4G subscribers who are the majority of having the major traffic consumption. And I would say that any spectrum below 50 megahertz for 5G, we're going to provide a kind of 4G-like experience in order to get really the real benefit that we were talking about the 5G, fixed wireless access, private networks, all these things. for sure we need a decent spectrum allocation. However, as I said, probably at the early beginning, just to build the experience and to pave the road, we can start by probably a little spectrum. However, in a couple of years' time, we should have promises from the regulator really to increase the allocated spectrum. So things could move gradually, actually, not necessarily to be from day one having the full spectrum from day one. This is actually my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mustafa. Let us move to our last question. As a vendor, can you offer guidance and on effective strategy for deploying 5G, 5G to monetize, 5G monetization, investment, and deliver substantial performance improvement for end users as vendors? So Zoran, Yusuf, who would like to answer?
Yeah. Maybe I can start. No, just to close on this spectrum discussion. I mean, again, I want to refer to good examples here in the neighboring examples from GCC countries. What they are doing, it's not only that they are allocating 100 megahertz. They start by allocating 100 megahertz. They're also trying to have to one operator continuous 2 carriers in 100 megahertz. I mean, you don't have everybody. Everybody in Saudi has 2 times. In UAE, 3 times 100 megahertz. And they're trying to have continuous because this is, again, making cheaper to deploy. It's making, because most of this radius equipment, we can support a couple of this, particularly those carriers if this block of spectrum is neighboring to each other. So that's meaning by one installation, by one investment, they can provide double or 3 times more capacity to end user. So this is also something which should be absolutely planned. Usually if allocation starts in smaller blocks, then they are mixed, and it's difficult to change this later on. If one operator uses 50 megahertz deploy, and then second operator is neighboring 50 megahertz tomorrow, to get one operator 100 megahertz is almost impossible. Meaning that first operator needs to replace their deployment, replace equipment, and so on. It's very expensive. We have these cases also. Very good example, for instance, from Oman. They changed from one technology, FDD to TDD. It's possible, but it's very complex, time consuming. So I think some of the planning here is super important, planning, advance, and trying really to see technology and to maximize efficiency, minimize the cost. This is, I think, the crucial. If you ask me on the way of deployment, and assuming this is also extended to the question, because we have those 2 types of 5G technology, which is 5G non-standalone, 5G standalone, and this is typical question now we are getting from operators is, shall we go to non-standalone and evolve to standalone, which majority of deployment we see now, or we go directly to the most advanced 5G technology like 5G standalone, something which is offering the biggest benefits of 5G technology. And we have these cases I was mentioning, Geo in India, massive deployment and going directly to standalone. There is arguments for both, but still we are seeing that majority of operators are choosing first to start with standalone. Mainly, I would say by two reasons. One is that ecosystem, majority of devices available with end users are non-standalone devices. So they have still limited amount of standalone devices, so they can serve more customers by starting with non-standalone. And then again, if starting by non-standalone, it's a smaller investment, because with that non-standalone, we are just adding or changing a radio network. We are not touching this core part, the server, how we call this core part of the network. It's reusing existing 4G network. If we are moving to standalone, we also need to change that core part. So it's a bigger investment. Then finally, we should say whatever is invested in non-standalone is absolutely reusable for standalone. So that radio, that spectrum, everything absolutely is reusable. Just step approach, upgrading, starting with one part of the network, modernizing, adding, and then moving to other parts. So that's, I'm assuming, is the main reason why we still see that kind of approach, that operators start with non-standalone and then moving towards standalone.
Thank you, Zoran. Yusuf, can we hear your point of view from Nokia's side, please?
No, of course, I think that the deployment strategy is also a very crucial point. Of course, there are many parameters to look at. We talked about the spectrum. There is also, the architecture, as Zoran mentioned, NSA versus SA. Of course, each one has, arguments for it. But the most, the most popular approach, I would say today, is going for NSA first because it has some benefits like reusing the 4G spectrum and allowing for a higher bandwidth, higher capacity in the beginning, which is also a motivation for users to move to 5G. But also, as I said, it's bigger capacity, so you can serve more subscribers. 5G NSA has for it, the simplicity of the network and being, of course, the target architecture for 5G that will enable new use cases. For instance, when we talk about industries, the slicing capabilities that are, where you take the network and create a specific subnetwork that would serve a specific, customer, a specific industry with very stringent SLAs. This is a capability that will fully come, with 5G and which can be very interesting, to help industries get into the 5G wagon. But of course, today we are even working on bringing some of these capabilities like slicing already to 4G and 5G NSA networks. So it could be a start that you could start with NSA, start experimenting and implementing these new capabilities of 5G, and later on move to 5G SA. For our region, the question is really important because as the region is a bit late when it comes, to spectrum allocation and to 5G launch, we compared already with GCC countries, we compared with West Africa as well, where the status is a bit more advanced. Maybe this delay could be used, of course, to prepare for SA. But again, this is our view is that technology is at the service of the business, and every operator is in a particular situation. The ecosystem in the country is not it's not the same. The opportunities are not the same. So what we tend to do is to try to work out these discussions with our operators, to work out with them a strategy for 5G launch that not only takes into consideration the technology side of things, but also the monetization, the B2B opportunities, etc. So this approach helps also the operator to get feedback from other networks that already launched, other use cases that were successful in similar situation, even if it's not similar regions. And I think that's very useful for them to take the right decision, because 5G, again, it is a shift from other technologies. A lot of operators today are worrying about the monetization of 5G because of the investment. But of course, we have examples of very successful use cases elsewhere in the world, and it is also time for the operators to step up in this field of digitalization with the industries, where we think a lot of the benefit will come from.
Thank you, Yusuf. Kenichi, would you like to add anything regarding the performance improvement for end users, or would you like to add anything, especially that lately most of the people in North Africa, they are saying that we have the 5G technology, but most of the users do not have 5G phones, or the 5G packages and data will be expensive. I don't know, that's an extra question from my side. So how can you answer this? How can you tell the end users about the 5G packages or even the mobile phones that are available?
Okay, yeah, obviously, my colleagues on the call have done justice to the initial question, but building on the follow-up question that you just threw in. It's a new technology coming. Yes, the good thing is that there is increasing awareness of 5G, even in markets where commercial 5G has not been launched yet. So I would say, that for operators today, this is 2023, many operator that launches 5G now, it is probably not going to do as much work as their counterparts in 2020 or 2021 did, trying to create that awareness, for 5G. So that awareness is already there, and I think that awareness, will drive interest amongst consumers to get the devices that they need, to subscribe to a 5G package. Now, when commercial 5G eventually, launches in the region, it will be interesting to see what pricing approach, the operators take. We have seen varying approaches, from initially being priced at a premium, to being priced the same as 4G, but I think, it's all converging. We've seen this in several markets that the especially with no new killer use case, as it were, pricing 5G at a premium, okay, it's more difficult to achieve. So we'll see what happens, in the region. But it's likely that consumers may not see much difference, if at all any, in terms of the price for 5G packages when it eventually becomes available, relative to what they already used to, for 4G, and that is going to be another factor that can stimulate, uptake, when they know, that they're not going to be paying through their noses, for 5G. It's going to drive interest, in the technology. Devices, are becoming cheaper. They're still above $300 average selling price, for 5G devices, but it's moving in the right direction, and by that I mean, it is coming down. So that is also going to be another interesting factor that will drive uptake. But look, our expectation, is that ultimately we see those new use cases, both for consumers and enterprises, that will really drive, that uptake in 5G services when they eventually arrive.
Thank you, Kenichi. So basically, in 2024, which countries do you think they will be almost ready to launch the 5G commercially, in your opinion, as GSMA? Or gentlemen, if you can answer.
Yeah, no, I think, today you could say most of the countries, Egypt, Tunisia, Morocco.
Yes, most of them.
Yes, they're ready. And we've talked a lot about spectrum, so I'm not going to overflog that point. But I mean, I was at an event earlier this year where I was on a panel with an operator from the region, and he was like, "Look, if we get spectrum today, we switch on today." It's that there that many of them are at that point. So if that spectrum question can be answered, then it's just gonna almost be like a flick of a switch, to get this going for most operators in the region.
Yeah, thank you, Kenichi. Gentlemen, would you like to add anything before we close our panel?
Yes, probably about the monetization of 5G. This is really a very big concern many of the operators in our markets. Sometimes comparing our markets with the GCC is not really a fair comparison. It's very very different economy, very different GDP, very different purchasing parity. So actually, the monetization of 5G in our region is a quite big concern. Our colleagues in the supplier side really need to put some efforts, like reducing the cost of acquisition of the CBEs. If we talk about the fixed wireless access, we still believe that the CBE that work with 5G is going to be of high price, that really not big amount of the subscribers of the people in our region can afford, which will limit actually also this kind of deployment. Acquisition of the technology itself, and I would say the hybriding the multiple spectrums in one equipment or whatever to reduce the cost of acquisition. Today you will have to add massive MIMO, different equipment, different I would say technologies with integrated antennas, and we'll have multiple spectrums working at the same time. So actually we still I would say there's a lot of efforts required from the supplier side really to find ways to ease and to facilitate I would say the acquisition of all these technologies for the operators and for the customer as well. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point, but we don't only compare we also compare them, for instance, to West Africa, and rightly so, because it's a region that is between West Africa, close to West Africa, and GCC, because it is also close to GCC. And what we see in various reports is that the advancement of adoption on various technologies, the advancement of the network capabilities are somehow aligned. What is a bit different in this generation is that, for instance, West Africa is starting to adopt 5G earlier, probably because there was a greater need for fixed wireless access, for instance, and it was already heavily marketed and deployed in 4G. Which drove the capacity demand higher, and probably it's one of the factors that is pushing West African countries to go for 5G, because of course there are some special events like in Côte d'Ivoire with the AFCON, etc. But I believe this is the main driver is really the capacity of the network, since all operators are basically doing their homework in terms of business case. And of course, this is due to the fact that fiber and DSL are not as advanced, I would say, in that market compared to North Africa. But even in North Africa, the fixed wireless opportunity and is still there, because the digital divide. We have a penetration of between 25 to 50% of fixed broadband, depending on the countries. Of course, there is a big difference between some countries, but that's a big opportunity. And as you highlighted, maybe coming a bit later into the game will bring a lot of benefit to the region, because of course the equipment is getting better and better and better, not only in terms of energy efficiency, in terms of capacity, in terms of bundling together bands in the radios, supporting wider bandwidth, which opens the door to spectrum sharing between operators. So there are many tools that can be leveraged by the operators today, and we need to basically use this delay to our advantage together as suppliers and operators to work out the best business case for you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Maybe
Zoran.
Yes, no, I fully agree with Mustafa what you're saying, that obviously it's not difficult, it's not easy to compare North Africa with some of the most richest country, like which are having GCC and some other region. And I think this is even bringing us more to that point which we was discussing, that we should do everything what we can as industry. So of course, vendors are there, operators are there, regulators are there to make sure that this is most efficient way how we are deploying. I mean, we have quite rich countries in Europe which did not follow that good model which we were seeing in GCC. And we're seeing one of the reasons why GCC is much in front of Europe in many countries of Europe with deployment is of that how spectrum is deployed, how they're enabling to use equipment on the most efficient way. So to minimize investment and to maximize performances. So I think because of that we don't have that luxury through DGP and economy. We need to be even more careful how we are deploying it, how we are planning to really to make sure that with spectrum allocation, which we done with auction projects, we maximize or minimize a cost, maximize efficiency of deployments. And of course, fully agree with Yusuf's point that equipment is becoming much more powerful, much more cost effective itself by the time. So that's of course also bringing support in deploying efficient network, efficient deployment.
Thank you, Zoran. I would like a gentleman to give you the answers of the attendees. Actually, we've launched the poll like almost 20 minutes ago. So we had our first question. How familiar are you with the current availability and progress of 5G in North African countries? So we had three answers: very advanced 0%, in progress 75%, and not started yet 25%, which is actually the logical thing that we were speaking about. How does 5G deployment in North Africa compare to global progress, and what lessons can be learned? Leading globally 0%, lagging behind 75%, limited data 25%. And our third question, in terms of consumer technology, how likely do you think it is that North African countries will soon offer widespread access to 5G network? Highly probable, 25% of the people voted. Seems unlikely in the near future, 75%. Not anticipating it to happen, 0%. I don't know if you have any comments on the percentage of the poll that people answered.
Yeah, well, I think this is something also to throw to my colleagues on the panel. They might want to, chime in as well, and that is regarding the question on in terms of consumer technology. How likely do you think it is that North Africa countries will soon offer widespread access to 5G networks? And the key word I wanted to call out there is widespread, access. Last year we published a 5G in Africa report. It covered the whole of Africa, which includes North Africa. But one of the points that we made in that report, based on a survey that we conducted, was that 5G rollout in Africa, might need to take a phased approach. So we've seen places like South Korea or the US where in a matter of months, they just pretty much rolled out 5G, across large swathes of the population, and right now they're above 90%, population coverage within only, a few years of rolling out the technology. Are we going to see that in Africa? We're going to see, a situation where an operator launches 5G in Morocco or Egypt, and within a couple of years, we're looking at 80%, 90% 5G coverage. For me personally, I'm not too sure about that. I think, 4G is going to remain important, in the region, especially in areas, locations where it is sufficient to meet the demand for connectivity, at that point in time. But in areas where there is a clear need for 5G, based on the demand, for enhanced connectivity, then we're going to see, 5G rolled out, in those areas. So my theory, and I call it a theory to be good to hear what others think about it, is that, in most places in Africa, and I think that includes North Africa, we're going to see operators take a phased approach where they launch 5G in areas of high demand, and as the business case improves, they're then going to gradually roll out, over time, to other parts of the country, while at the same time, upgrading legacy networks to 4G, which in many cases, will be sufficient, to meet demands in many locations, for a while. So yeah, just thought I should throw that out and see if anyone has any comment.
Thank you, Kelechi. Nice theory, by the way. Gentlemen, I have one question, if you would like to answer it. Are there any future plans from the operators to provide unlimited data subscription based on the speed uptake expected upon launching the 5G?
We need some marketing guys to answer this. We can say why not, but sure. I mean, we don't have 5G, so we cannot give a clear answer whether yes or not. But we can say why not. I mean.
Yeah.
Okay. And there's another question as well.
Maybe I can add on this. Yes, not an operator, but engage in the other markets and seeing what some operators doing. It was mentioned that it's going to be the same cost, and yes, I mean, it's if you don't have new use cases, if you don't see the value, it's difficult to have higher charges. But what we see in the operators doing, I mean, 5G is much more efficient. They have much more capacity, so they are offering much bigger packages. Some of them also unlimited, maybe based on the speed, and then these tires and price which you're paying based on the speed, but there's unlimited packages. Or these packages become much bigger, because now, of course, with much better devices, consumer can use much more data. And then that eventually also increase ARPU, because these bigger packages become more expensive. Cost per byte, megabyte is lower, but much bigger packages become a little bit more expensive, so bring a little bit more revenue monetization for the end user. So, but fact is that with that new spectrum, with that new technology, we have massive capacity. Operators have massive capacity, and then they can see what is the real strategy. Shall it be unlimited packages? Shall it be much bigger packages, which a little bit higher prices? How they will really serve the customers on the best way.
Thank you, Zoran. Yusuf, would you like to add anything?
It's mute, no?
Yusuf, we cannot hear you. Yusuf,
I was saying that that of course, when we talk about unlimited packages, we think spontaneously about mobile broadband, because it's the one we use the most. But if we go back to fixed wireless access, which is for me again interesting here, is that if you look at fixed broadband, packages are always unlimited. And there are a lot of operators today that are offering fixed wireless access on 5G and thinking about making the packages unlimited to make it an experience that is very similar to fiber and to DSL, of course, to justify, of course, the higher ARPU of that fixed connectivity. And we've been also at Nokia working with operators on solutions to address that, because it's not only about the radio capacity, it's also about the core. So we have solutions where we can, handle the traffic at like the fixed traffic at the core, fixed core level, which makes it much more efficient in terms of OPEX for the operator to offer unlimited traffic for fixed broadband, even if it is fixed wireless access.
Thank you, Yusuf. Gentlemen, if you don't have anything to add, I would like to close this very insightful panel. I really want to thank each one of you on their perspective, on their point of view, on the very insightful information that you shared for all the attendees and all the viewers that watched the webinar. I would like to thank Kelechi from GSMA thanks a lot for your presentation with all these insightful and informative numbers on the North African and global perspective. I would like to thank Zoran from Ericsson as well. Thank you for your insightful talk about the spectrum, about the sustainability and green. Thank you, Yusuf, as well from Morocco, and our deepest condolences for your country. I hope everything will be all right after the earthquake. Mustafa, thanks a lot from Orange Egypt as well, from your insight, from the operator's point of view. It was an insightful panel. Thanks a lot, gentlemen, for having you, and hopefully the coverage will be afterwards of all our panels. Thanks a lot, gentlemen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.